1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 through 7. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. If you've ever worked on definitions, one of the common ways to define a thing is by saying what it is and what it isn't. And as we go through love, that'll become very obvious. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy, does not boast, is not proud, does not dishonor others, is not self-seeking, is not easily angered, keeps no record of wrongs, does not delight in evil, back to the positive, but rejoices with the truth, always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. So you see that negative and positive way of going about and defining love. And what we see in here, what many will say as they go through this is that love is a verb. It's an action. And we'll go through this and see how, it's very true that love is a verb. It's something that is seen. But as we looked at in last week in verses 1 through 3, we saw that it is not just an action. Because you can have the act but still lack love. Excuse me. And so, what we want to remember is that we are not seeing just verbs, but really verbs that get to attitudes of the heart. And that will be apparent as we think about these descriptions. The first is that love is patient. Patience, real patience, as we know, it comes from the heart. It doesn't just mean that you stand there and wait for a really long time, because you can wait for a really long time impatiently, right? You can wait for a really long time angrily and things like that. So real patience is that ability to wait, and particularly here, what the idea is that oneself, and I'm just gonna say self throughout this whole thing because we're gonna say it a lot. The self is less important than others. When we are patient, what we're saying is that somebody else's problems are a bigger deal than my own. We're saying to God, your sovereign plan and the outworking of it is better and more important than my own. We're taking our problems and we're putting them last. And that is something that's done from the heart. Secondly, love is kind. And I think here we definitely want to look at Jesus in the Gospels and see the way that he deals with people. And no doubt Jesus can be harsh, but he teaches us what kindness is. And I think particularly when we look at the lepers, when we look at the prostitutes, when we look at tax collectors, we see so much of that. And what we remember as well is that his love is shown primarily and generally to sinners in dying for them. And so love is kind, and kindness, it can be shown, but it's also an attitude and a way of going about things. It does not envy. Envy is to look at somebody else's stuff and say, I should have that. And if we were to go in the opposite direction, we would say love rejoices when other people have that. If I can't rejoice because I'm thinking that I am entitled to those things, obviously I cannot be loving them. It does not boast. Here, the idea is of someone who is just talking about their own accomplishments, their own feats, right? And, what is unloving about that? Well, it's about bringing glory to myself, about making myself look good, which means that the eyes of my heart are on me. They're not on someone else. If my heart is focused on other people, boasting won't come out, but maybe praise will. right, for others, and it is not proud. So you need pride to have impatience. You need pride to be unkind. You need pride to have envy, because in all of these cases, the self is first. Me first. And whether this turns into a bunch of things, it can be I'm always right. It could be I get all the glory. It could be don't make me look bad, right? But all of these are unloving fruits of a proud heart. It does not dishonor others, and so what's in view here is simply that. Just we're not. If it's antithetical to love to be dishonoring, to be bringing shame or humiliation to another person. Obviously, as you go through the loving process of discipline, sometimes shame and humiliation will be byproducts, but they must never be the goal. Even when we are in the process of church discipline, the goal is not to dishonor someone. The goal is to restore them, although they may experience dishonor in that process. And so we have to really be honest about the motives in our own heart in some of these. It is not self-seeking. Pride as well is necessary for one to be self-seeking. If I am self-seeking, that means I'm not others-seeking, right? And love seeks the good of others. It is not easily angered. So there's a lot of connection here between that and patience, again, and pride. If I think I'm always right, if I have a lack of patience because my problems are always the most important, then I will be very easily angered. It's not to be confused with some concept of like self-control. There are many people who get angry quickly, but can control the expression of their anger. And that is not the same thing as not being easily angered. This is an attitude of the heart. One who is not easily angered has a lot of patience, a lot of love, a lot of kindness for other people, even as they are wronged. Which leads to the next one. It keeps no record of wrongs. This is not some naive, oh, did you hurt me yesterday? I forgot when you punched me in the face. It's not that. We need to be wise. Okay, so you have to be wise, and sometimes you need to be remembering wrongs just because of the present threat. But even in that wisdom, we still need love to guide us, because the attitude that Paul is talking about here is that one that when the one keeps a record of wrongs, they have no forgiveness. They might say, I've forgiven you, but they just keep bringing up the record of wrongs. They keep bringing it up, keep bringing it up. That is not forgiveness. That is not love, which tells us, by the way, to forgive someone, you must love them. And I think that's one of the things that we run into a lot, is that we try to forgive, but we have not love, and it doesn't work because we can't get over the record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil. Remember that the whole law can be summed up in love your neighbor. So love is equal to righteousness. If you could keep the law, you'd be righteous. If to do that, you'd have to love perfectly. Which would mean that evil is something that is antithetical to love. That love actually cannot delight in evil, but it rejoices with the truth. And so in love, we're going to rejoice whenever the truth shows up. And whether that's, some people would say that, evil is here and then truth is really more like righteousness. I wouldn't go that far. But really just in truth, I think it's a good translation of that word. And so just take it as it is. Rejoices with the truth. What if the truth hurts? Sometimes that happens, right? Sometimes someone's going to tell you the truth, and it turns out that they've been talking trash about you behind your back, or they've been betraying your trust. Oh, the truth hurts sometimes, but even then, if love is there, it'll be able to rejoice that the truth has come out. And here comes the rest of the positives. It always protects. Now, this word protects is an interesting word for Paul. It is everywhere else translated bear. And your version of the Bible might, in fact, have bear. And so what we have at the end is kind of a parallel. It always bears all things, actually, is the translation, which is very similar to perseveres. And then always trusting and always hoping are very similar, because the word trust here is actually more literally believe. And so I think there's an intentional parallelism at the back that the NIV translators don't think is there, and so they try to use different but similar words that kind of expand the meaning. I personally think that there's a parallel, so that's kind of how I'm going to go about it. But it always bears all things, always perseveres all things, which means that there's a component of love that is time. So you can't just say, I love you for a moment, and then I stopped loving you. True love always protects, always perseveres, always bears, always perseveres. It weathers the storm. It weathers wrongdoings. It weathers evil done against it. That's what true love does. It continues to bear all things. It continues to persevere. So important, because we have a church of sinners. And the only way that we're going to stay together is if we're willing to bear all things. We have to be willing to love. And as again, back to attitudes of the heart, we have to want to love. We have to truly love. And that's going to only be possible through the gospel, through a Savior who has borne all things to save a church of sinners. And then it always trusts and always hopes. So trust, again, is probably better translated as believe. And it always believes, it always hopes. So there's basically the way that we could sum this up is that love is optimistic. So love does not say things like, he'll never change. Love says things like, by God's grace, he can always change, and I'm going to keep believing that he will. I'm going to keep believing that he can. I'm going to keep hoping in that. And so we see this with, especially in Jesus' time, with particularly the prostitutes and the tax collectors. These were a group of people that everybody else had written off. They'll never change. Not Jesus. Jesus says, I think that these prostitutes, these tax collectors, they're gonna come around to the gospel. And by the way, Jesus, as critical as he is of the Pharisees, also meets with now I'm forgetting his name. John chapter 3. Nicodemus. Jesus is also willing to meet with Nicodemus. He's not written off anybody. He knows the truth. And yet even then remains optimistic. And that's what love does. Love always trusts and always hopes for the best for everyone. So just a brief definition of love. But man, Paul says a lot in these short 4 verses.